Men didn't suddenly wake up one morning and decide they prefer silence over romance. This shift didn't happen overnight. It was years in the making, built quietly through disappointment, expectation, exhaustion, and a kind of emotional inflation nobody wants to admit. And now, in 2025, it's reached a breaking point. Not with anger, not with protest, but with a calmness so unsettling it's changing the entire dating world. For generations, men were told relationships are the ultimate measure of adulthood, that a good man settles down, gets married, builds a family, sacrifices without question, and proves his worth through devotion. Meanwhile, women were encouraged to explore, choose, experience, reject, wait for better, and never settle. Nobody thought about what happens when those two narratives finally collide. Because now, they have. And the result is a phenomenon nobody predicted. Men didn't stop loving women. They stopped needing to. They stopped treating love like oxygen and started treating it like dessert. Nice to have, but not necessary for survival. And that single mental shift has more impact than any breakup, divorce statistic, or dating trend ever could. You can see it everywhere if you stop pretending not to. Gyms full of men wearing headphones, not flirting. Coffee shops where women scan the room but men stare at laptops. Dating apps where women demand effort while men barely swipe. The absence isn't accidental, it's intentional, and it's spreading faster than anyone expected. Because here's what modern culture failed to prepare women for. Men finally realized peace is priceless. Not comfort, not convenience. Peace. The kind that doesn't require explanation, emotional negotiation, or constant performance. The kind of peace that comes from being alone, making decisions nobody critiques, spending money without resentment, waking up without emotional weather forecasts. The kind of peace that stays. And once a man experiences that, truly experiences it, everything changes. He no longer chases someone who treats interest like a privilege. He no longer auditions for affection. He no longer asks, "What do I have to do to be enough?" Instead, he asks a much more dangerous question. What do I actually want? That question is the reason so many men are walking away, quietly, without drama or announcement. Not because they're hurt, not because they're bitter, because for the first time in history, they have permission to choose themselves. This is what women don't understand yet. Men didn't withdraw because they hate relationships. They withdrew because relationships stopped feeling like partnership and started feeling like employment. Constant evaluation, constant responsibility, constant emotional taxes with unclear returns. And men are realizing something they were never allowed to believe. They function better when they're alone. They eat healthier, sleep deeper, focus harder, work smarter, age slower, and grow faster. They become sharper, calmer, more strategic, more self-defined. Without the emotional turbulence of modern dating, their lives stabilize. That stability becomes addictive. At first, it's subtle. A man enjoys a quiet weekend and wonders why he ever gave it up. Then he notices how much money he saves not trying to impress someone. Then he realizes he hasn't argued in months. Then he tastes independence, real independence, and understands why single men statistically live happier lives than married ones. And suddenly, the thing society warned him about, being alone, feels like an upgrade. Women see the shift, and they don't know how to interpret it. They used to be pursued relentlessly. Now they feel observed, evaluated, chosen only if aligned, not rewarded simply for existing. That change feels offensive because power is moving, and power never moves without friction. But the shift continues anyway. Because men have finally accepted a truth they used to fear. Loneliness is temporary, but the wrong relationship can ruin your entire life. Divorce courts proved it, dating apps accelerated it, culture normalized it, and men have adapted to it. The modern man isn't disappearing, he's evolving. He'd rather build a life that fulfills him than gamble that life on someone who resents being part of it. He'd rather protect his sanity than chase a fantasy. And in 2025, that realization isn't rare. It's spreading. Not through anger, not through revenge, through relief. The kind of relief you feel when you finally stop trying to fix something that was never designed to work in the first place. And the world hasn't even begun to feel the consequences of that shift, but it will. What nobody expected is how calm this male exodus would be. Revolutions are usually loud, destructive, fueled by anger. But this one, it's silent. It's happening in grocery store aisles, in apartments lit by one lamp, in quiet Saturday mornings when no one is asking for emotional labor. It's unfolding one peaceful breath at a time. And that's what makes it unstoppable. Because men aren't arguing anymore, they're opting out. For decades, women believed men would always return, no matter how chaotic, demanding, or dismissive relationships became. Society told them men need companionship more than women do. That message was repeated so often it became gospel. But 2025 proved it wrong. The men who once feared loneliness now fear losing themselves. The cost has become too high, and the return too unpredictable. And here's the uncomfortable twist. Women didn't notice the shift until they needed those men again. Suddenly, the emotionally available, stable, hard-working man, the one overlooked for being too predictable, too serious, too calm, became rare. Women scroll through dating apps now and find men who smile politely but don't pursue, who respond courteously but don't invest, who enjoy conversation but don't chase. Not because they're damaged, but because they're done auditioning. That's when panic sets in. Because for the first time, female attraction isn't enough to secure male commitment. Beauty can get attention, but it no longer guarantees effort. Ambition impresses coworkers, but it doesn't inspire loyalty. Independence may earn applause online, but it doesn't build partnership. Men aren't seduced by slogans anymore. They're evaluating outcomes. And the math isn't flattering. He looks around at married friends, exhausted, financially drained, emotionally minimized, and wonders, why would I sign up for that? He watches custody battles, alimony hearings, breakups where the man apologizes for not being perfect while she celebrates finding herself, and he quietly decides his soul is more valuable than approval. It's not commitment men fear, it's the asymmetry. He knows that if a relationship fails, he loses the house, the savings, the kids, the reputation, while she gains sympathy, social currency, and sometimes financial reward. So he does the most logical, least dramatic thing possible. He stays out. And in that absence, something fascinating happens. Men rediscover themselves. They pick up forgotten hobbies. They lift heavier in the gym. They take spontaneous road trips. They read books they actually enjoy instead of pretending to like whatever their partner recommends. They reconnect with friends, nature, purpose, silence. They realize their lives expand when their emotional bandwidth isn't constantly outsourced. They notice that their mood stabilizes, their creativity returns, their ambition sharpens. They're no longer exhausted from trying to decode emotional landmines or maintain harmony at the cost of honesty. Their anxiety fades because no one is waiting to be disappointed. This isn't avoidance, it's healing. And healed men see the world differently They stop craving validation because they finally validate themselves. They stop performing masculinity and start living it. They stop chasing love and start building lives worth loving. Meanwhile, women are confused because the old strategies no longer work. The tests, the games, the delayed replies, the emotional roller coasters. Men used to tolerate them because they didn't know better. Now, they recognize them instantly and walk away without a word. Not out of coldness, out of clarity. The shift isn't just emotional, it's economic. The average single man in 2025 has more disposable income, more time, more personal freedom than the average married man. He spends money on himself instead of trying to sustain a lifestyle for someone who resents him anyway. He invests in his health instead of trying to survive stress. He buys peace instead of approval. And here's the wild part. He ages better. Not because he's biologically superior, but because he's not being drained. A peaceful man is a youthful man. A purposeful man is an attractive man. A man who protects his time becomes someone others want access to but can't easily earn. Women sense this shift intuitively. They see men who used to chase now walking with a level of self-contained confidence that demands respect. And suddenly, they want to be chosen by the man who no longer needs to choose anyone. But he's no longer impressed by what once captivated him: beauty, charisma, emotional theatrics. He wants reciprocity, softness, partnership, peace. Not because he's fragile, but because he knows what chaos costs. And when a man finally understands the price of peace, he refuses to negotiate it. That's why 2025 belongs to the quiet men, the intentional men, the men who aren't trying to win dating, they're trying to win life. And they are. They're healthier, they're happier, they're freer. And deep down, society knows it, which is why everyone keeps trying to convince them they're wrong. But they're not. They're just early. But here's the part nobody is ready to confront. This isn't a phase. It's not a trend. It's not a temporary cultural mood swing. It's the new default. Because once men learn how to build a life without relying on romance to fuel it, they never return to the old system. And women are starting to feel the aftershocks. For the first time in modern history, single men aren't waiting for someone to save them from solitude. They're not drinking, scrolling, or working themselves numb to avoid it. They're embracing it, treating it like sacred territory instead of punishment. Solitude used to be a fear. Now it's a flex, a lifestyle, a strategy, a shield. Men once viewed marriage and relationships as the reward for stability. Now they see stability as the reward for staying single. Think about how insane that shift is. A man used to be celebrated for being chosen by a woman. Now he's celebrated for choosing himself. In 2025, masculinity isn't defined by who you protect. It's defined by what you refuse to sacrifice anymore. And peace sits at the top of that list. This awakening didn't come from misogyny or resentment. It came from observation, from watching men lose everything in the name of love, not just money, homes, and custody, but identity, confidence, ambition, masculinity itself. It came from seeing relationships that were supposed to nourish men instead drain them until there was nothing left. So, men stopped offering themselves as emotional resources. They stopped interviewing for the role of boyfriend. They stopped auditioning for validation. They stopped negotiating with people who believed affection should be earned, not given. And now, something extraordinary is happening. Men are thriving without romance. They're starting businesses, they're traveling alone, they're lifting, meditating, building, learning. They're fixing childhood wounds instead of outsourcing healing to a partner. They're forming brotherhoods, communities, networks that don't revolve around dating. They're living lives that don't require permission or apology.
Meanwhile, women are waking up to a reality they never prepared for.
A world where men no longer chase. A world where emotional access to men isn't guaranteed. A world where being desired isn't the same as being valued. And suddenly, femininity has to evolve in a way masculinity already did, through accountability. Because without effort, without reciprocity, without peace, men simply walk away. Not dramatically, not angrily, not with a speech, just quietly and permanently. And that silent exit hurts far more than rejection ever did, because men used to return eventually. Now they don't. They build new routines, new standards, new non-negotiables. Standards that don't revolve around beauty, sex, or approval, but character, kindness, emotional maturity, mutual respect. Standards that many modern women were never taught to meet because they thought men would settle forever. Not anymore. The world is shifting. Dating culture is shifting. The power dynamic is shifting. And it's not shifting toward men. It's shifting toward peace, toward purpose, toward self-governed fulfillment. And that scares people, because a man at peace can't be manipulated, bribed, guilted, or shamed into choosing chaos again. He's immune to pressure. He chooses differently, speaks differently, moves differently. He becomes what society fears most, a man who no longer needs anything it uses to control him. A man like that doesn't run from commitment. He simply refuses to enter one that costs more than it gives. And because of that, he's finally happy. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but sustainably. That's why men are happier alone in 2025. Not because they hate women, not because they're broken, not because they've given up on love, but because they finally understand something life-changing. Happiness doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself first. And once a man learns that, every relationship after that must earn its place in his life, not demand it. So now the question becomes, is this the end of traditional relationships or the beginning of healthier ones? Be honest. Do you think men are happier alone because they finally awakened, or because modern relationships simply aren't worth it anymore? I want to hear your take on this.